Hey there, listeners. It's Jess, Prospector's head of new media. I am so excited for today's episode. We're digging deep into transforming the mining industry through female leadership and investment. Today's guest is Beth Borody, a true trailblazer in mining who wears multiple important hats. As founder and CEO of the Femina Collective, she's created a powerful community where women in natural resources can find genuine connection and growth opportunities. She's also the Mining Sector Lead for IRMA, the Initiative for Responsible Mining Assurance, bringing her deep expertise in ESG and sustainability to help shape industry standards. In this episode, Beth shares the fascinating origin story of Femina, which started as informal Zoom calls during the pandemic and has grown into a force for change in the mining industry. She and Emily dig deep into some really exciting developments, including Femina's upcoming investment club that aims to reshape how mining projects get funded. They also explore how combining female leadership with responsible mining practices could transform the industry over the next decade. But first, are you in the mining industry and interested in joining Emily for an episode of On the Rocks? Curious about getting your message in front of our diverse listeners? Check out prospectorportal.com/sponsor to connect with our team and learn more about sponsorship opportunities. Now, let's hear from Emily and Beth.
All right, Beth, I'm so excited to finally have you here on the Rocks to talk about Femina and all the cool work that you're doing. Welcome. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emily. I'm so excited to be able to be here and share more about what we're doing over at Femina and what we're doing to change the experience for women in our industry and just chat with you for the next little bit about who we are and why we're here.
Yeah, and this is, super on trend, as our listeners know, for a lot of our content and the topics that we care about and try to really elevate within the discussion around the industry. And one thing that consistently comes up on the show from all kinds of different perspectives is how our industry really needs to transform in order to meet future demands, everything from the energy transition to ESG to new technology. And certainly with Femina Collective, you're taking a really unique approach to building a powerful community of women leaders. And I wonder if you could kick it off by just talking about what sparked that vision of creating not just, a network and like a networking get together thing, but a real force for change within the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever I share the origin story of Femina, I always start by saying that I started Femina really unintentionally. It wasn't something I set out to do, but when Femina was born, I was holding an executive role at one of Canada's mid-tier gold producers, and I was the only woman on our executive team. I was 10 years younger than the next guy who was on the team, who was then 10 years younger than the next guy on the team, which, is fairly typical. And so coming as someone who doesn't have a technical mining background, my background's actually, if you look at it from an academic perspective, is international development and political science. And I was really brought into the mining industry through my network and through colleagues of mine. And so holding a senior role within a company without being technical, without having a lot of other women around me, it felt really lonely at times. And that isn't because I felt lonely from my executive team. I loved the team that I worked with. I loved the CEO that I reported into. But not having that female camaraderie or that female support was something I really found lacking. And I was going to the networking events, I was going to the luncheons, and they felt like real kind of moments in time that didn't have a lot that came afterwards. And I thought, there's got to be other women feeling this. And there's got to be other women who are going through challenges with their male colleagues, with their female colleagues, who just want to actually form deeper connections. And so I sent out a Zoom link in 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic to a few women, some of the women who worked with me at one of our sites, some of the women who worked for another company. And I can still feel the feelings of jumping onto that call because we all showed up with ourselves. We didn't come on as our titles or our companies, but we came on just as women wanting to say, we're here. We do really great things. We hold these management level roles. We have high levels of responsibility. Yet there's still something missing for us. We still aren't getting the same treatment or the equal treatment that we're seeing amongst our male colleagues. And so we had a full hour conversation. It was really wonderful, really authentic. And we just committed that we would connect again the next quarter. And so over the next few quarters, I'd just send out a Zoom link and I'd say, whoever wanted to come, just come. And by our fourth call, we had 46 women from 16 companies across Canada joining this conversation. And again, just showing up as their names. On Zoom, you can put your title, you can kind of put who you're representing. And no one was doing that. Everyone was just showing up as their name, not their title, not their company. And throughout these calls, I started bringing in coaches that I would use or other executives that I knew in the industry to come and chat with women, to answer questions. And it just had a different feel because it felt like a safety net for women as opposed to a networking event that they had to show up with and then kind of report back on the value that they were getting from. Yeah. And so at that point, at that fourth call, people started saying, what are you doing with this? We really love this. We love the community that's being built. We love access to these different people and these different executives who come on. So what could you build for us? And I went back to my CEO at the time and I said, I think I've landed on something. Do you want me to build this out for the company and it be something that the company own? Or can I build this out on my own? And he said, go and build it out. We'll support you any way you can, or any way we can. And Femina was born from that. I spent some time thinking about what do women want? And it really was that community, that connection, that safety, the ability to continue to grow and develop. I think we are so much more than just DEI conversations. We are talented. We have such diverse backgrounds, but we are always pegged to just speak about DEI or ESG. And as an ESG professional, there's a lot that I have been able to gain from being parts of those panels, but we get really sick of just being the DEI aspect of a company. And so I thought if we can build a community that is safe, that is connected, that draws on other areas of expertise, that's getting women into more senior level roles, showing women that this is an industry that we want to be in and we want to stay, we should do that. And so that's why we launched with our membership base. And that's what's always been the core of who we are. And that's why I landed on the name Femina, because I wanted it to be something that was very female forward, very female centric. And that even if you didn't know we worked in mining, if you saw our name, you saw our brand, you knew that through and through we were about women and supporting women. And so that's how we came to be, and that's how we started.
I love it. There's so much. I mean, it feels like so long ago and yet so recent, right?
Absolutely.
It's amazing some of the unique things that came out of the challenges associated with COVID hitting, right? And it just a different way to have community, including this podcast, now that I think about it, right?
Yeah.
Where, you just had to learn how to communicate and connect with people in a different way. And that opened up so many opportunities.
Well, and I think for us in particular, it really set us up for success because we had to start by forming virtual community. So it immediately didn't limit us to being in one area or being tied to a certain geography. We were able to meet with women globally right off the bat. And so as Femina's continued to grow, our virtual community has been what we continue to see thrive. And then as we've now come out of the pandemic and we're now in kind of post-pandemic world, we've then started introducing in-person events. And our in-person events are fantastic. We love doing them. We host dinners. We do these things where we can bring women together, but we are immediately limited by being in the area that we are for those events. And so I think that was a real strength of ours, was that the pandemic gave us, was that we immediately just were accessible to anyone, regardless of where you were in the world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Such a huge advantage. Well, and so on the note that you raised, where like, okay, everyone wants to talk about DEA. I mean, no, sorry, not DEA. DEI. I live in Florida. Maybe it's more DEA at the time. The DEI and ESG, I think one of the really amazing things that you're working on is looking at how you can disrupt traditional mining investment through the Femina Investment Club, which is something I'm so excited to hear about. And for our listeners, the idea is combining female investors with IRMA certification requirements. And it just feels like exactly the kind of innovation that our industry needs. So I wonder if you could just start by walking us through how this concept evolved, because again, I think it's so putting right to the front. Like, we're not just going to focus on women as a DEI checkbox. Like, women are going to bring money to the table and they're going to make really smart, profitable business decisions off of their knowledge in the industry, right? So women talk about those topics as well on panels and in the C-suite. So give us a view.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think, so I'm based in Canada. And when I started looking at the female investor side of things, particularly when it came to mining, the first thing that kept coming across any research that I was doing was that in Canada, women are going to hold 50% of all wealth in the country by 2030. And we know that it's going to be more of the millennial generation coming up and owning that wealth, which is really exciting and a huge opportunity for us to look at a country that's already resource rich, that already endlessly speaks about the need for our critical minerals to be accelerated, to be coming out of the ground, and to be a leader in this area, to couple that then with a full demographic that is completely untapped for mining investment. And so, about 18 months ago or 20 months ago at this point, I had met one of Canada's juniors, a CEO. She was a female CEO, and we were chatting about just the struggle to access capital from the junior space, from the critical mineral space, and how the access to capital and all of the talk and kind of pomp and circumstance around the critical mineral strategy were just not. They weren't meeting us. They weren't on the same page. They weren't in the same book. And her and I were hosting these investor lunches and investor dinners where I was trying to bring different investors to her who could be interested, investors who were saying things like, we want to invest in female forward companies. We want to invest in innovation. We know women who run companies, run safer companies, more profitable companies. They make decisions differently. And so that's what we want to invest in. And so myself and another woman were trying to facilitate these connections. And we would have the same conversation over and over again. And it got to a final conversation where we finished this meal. This woman who was the CEO, she finished her presentation. She finished kind of answering all of the questions. And we looked around the table, and all of the people who were around the table were all white men who were all, 65 plus. One of them forgot to turn his hearing aids on during the meeting, and therefore asked a lot of questions that, had he turned his hearing aids on, would have been answered during the presentation. And it got to the point where finally one of them put his hands up and essentially said, we went to another man in Canada. You could probably name who the individual male investors are in mining on your two hands. And they had gone to one of them, and he had said, I don't know this woman. I wouldn't be comfortable investing in her. And so therefore that had the domino effect that all of them said, unless you get someone credible on your board, we can't take the risk of investing in you. And how deflating. So they all left. Her and I truly just sat down in the chairs and felt like, where are the women? Why are women not in this conversation? And so one of the things that going through this whole process with her that I learned about myself, I am in my mid-30s. I've been working in mining, holding senior roles, making a good salary. And so therefore learned that I met accreditor investor status in Canada, which I had no idea. I had no idea about the accredited investor world. I had no idea that being an accredited investor gave me the opportunity to invest in projects and in opportunities that other people wouldn't necessarily have. And I thought, again, my goodness, if that's me and that's my realization, I know plenty of other women who are either making more money than me or who also probably qualify and just have no idea what this world could look like. And so through working with this other woman, I thought, we've got to do something, and we've got to do something from the Femina perspective about making sure that women know there's an opportunity for them to invest. And so over the last 18 months, we've been working on the legal side of the framework of what does this look like? Obviously, any sort of investment, we want to make sure that we're doing it the right way. We're doing it and structuring in a way that makes sense for us. And so we landed on essentially starting this with a pilot through a private investment club. So the Femina Private Investment Club, which will be launching in 2025, officially is an opportunity for Canadian women to come together and to pool funds with a minimum level investment to come into the club, pool funds to make larger investments in mining companies or supporting assets, infrastructure, things like that. And so the whole idea is that when I was looking at myself, I thought, I don't have $1 million in cash to just put on the table somewhere, but I certainly have a good sum of money that if it was paired with others, could actually have some pretty significant value for a company. And so that's where the idea came from. And the thought was, if we have the ability to then help influence from an investment perspective, what does that mean for someone then being able to sit on the board, be able to do advisory services, and start seeing that ripple effect of women not just being employees of a company, but women actually sitting at the highest level of decision making and be able to influence the way that companies then move forward and develop, and not just rely on the same pocketbooks that generally invest in Canadian mining, but have an opportunity to really disrupt that space. So we're hoping to have the club act as a pilot, because it does have to be based in Canada. But then if that does work, actually partner with female-owned investment fund managers to then move it to a fund model and then open this up to be more global. And at this point, we've had very little resistance against it. So it's gained quite a lot of momentum and quite a lot of attention just by talking about it. And so we look forward to just watching this grow and seeing how women can really make an impact in the industry this way.
That's so exciting. I first of all, I sympathize and empathize with the emotions you two probably had at that dinner. I can't tell you how many of those pitches I've been through myself. And it's like, everybody says they want all this stuff, but when it comes time to pull out the pen and write the check, man, everybody just goes to the same old, right? And
yep.
I won't name her because she'd probably kill me, but a good friend of mine in the industry has a phrase for those groups, and she calls it PMS, pale, male, and stale. There's a lot of PMS stuff going on.
There is,
when you're trying to raise money, and I think it's confusing to a lot of folks because they hear a lot of talk. So the assumption is that if you're a woman running a mining company or raising money for any type of, new tech, new venture, the assumption is there are all these funds, there's all this money set aside for you, and you're getting special treatment, right? And that any money you raise you're getting it easier than the guy down the street. And the reality that I've seen, at least, is it is still very much not the case.
Well, and you look at the tech world, which is where we often see a lot of the information and stats coming out around investment, and tech, which is kind of far more established on the venture fund side of things and investment. And it's kind of what you think. Women still only receive 2% of the funding in tech, which is established. And you could make some pretty good assumptions on how that mirrors over to the mining industry as well. And I think exactly as you said, there is this expectation or thought that there is all this money floating around for women because we're all really proactive and wanting to see a more inclusive environment. But the fact is that decisions are still being made in the old boys club. And that isn't to say that there aren't some really great male investors out there who are trying to do things differently. But for the whole, it is still, people don't want to put their own necks on the line to invest in something different. Because if it doesn't work out, and particularly if it doesn't work out with a female CEO, that will be amplified far more than if a project didn't work out with the male CEO. And no one wants their own ego hit from investing in that and going against the norm. And that's what we really have to shake up and see and show that there's a different way and that women have a different way of being able to do this for the industry.
Yeah. And I think it's so powerful, basically, women's money going to the projects that they value. And I, again, personally really resonate with this because the first check for Prospector was from my dear friend, Beth Myers. And when COVID hit in March of 2020 and all the other money that I'd gotten committed disappeared overnight, she was the only check that stayed in. So
amazing.
Today is really because of the first check written by a female investor. So I think there are certainly differences in general, right, in how women can evaluate investments and make commitments to investments, and for different reasons. So I'm personally really excited to see where your club goes and how it evolves, hopefully expands so that everybody can participate. Because I think I would put money in. I'm sure there would be really good return.
Great. I'll hold you to that. No, and you're totally right. And I think the thing is that not only do women make decisions differently, and we know that women make more kind of holistic decisions. They are really smart with their money. We also need to remember that women also just like making money as well. Yeah, and there is an opportunity for women to generate wealth by having mining support their overall portfolios. We know it's risky. We know it's a long-term investment. We know all of these things, and we are the ones working in the industry helping to manage and mitigate those risks. And so who better to invest than women who are already in the industry and understand it really intimately? And especially at that junior space, we have such phenomenal women. I think one of the things with forming the club, looking at the structure, the infrastructure, how would you evaluate projects, things like that, is that whole due diligence piece. There have been so many women who have come alongside, both from Canada and the US at this point, to help us figure out what does a good due diligence process look like from with a project. And the talent and technical understanding that these women bring to the table is unlike anything else I have ever seen in other due diligence teams or projects. And that to me was really exciting when we started to see that, because not only did they bring a different lens on their own personal investment, but they have the background, they have the talent to be able to go into the nitty-gritty details of these projects and see what's working, what isn't, where are the blind spots, what's happening that's like a great opportunity. And the fact that we can build that out as women for women just gives me so much joy, because it's what we need to be able to actually show change at this level of the industry.
Yeah, and I think certainly, understand like Canada and the US, but also, most of my experience in the industry has been in emerging and developing markets, right, and countries. And I always tell folks, like in most places in the world, mining is essentially a family business, right? And it's not necessarily the big corporates that are actually running, producing assets globally. I mean, that's what we all think of because it's kind of the world we inhabit. But when you go out to other parts of the world, it's families that build and operate mines, and women are typically really, really involved inside of that family business. And so there's so much technical and business know-how globally also that can be tapped in. And having worked in a lot of countries where people were always shocked that a woman could go work, especially, very conservative Muslim countries, right? I always say I had access to a whole 50% of the population that a white man going into would not be able to talk to and understand what was going on in organizations and companies operating in those areas, because there are women everywhere, but men actually can't go and talk to all of them in the same way that I can. So I had a much different understanding of what was causing delays, what were some of the technical challenges, what were some of the business challenges, because I had access to a whole nother group within these decision-making organizations or implementers. And I think that's another really cool part about what you're doing, because I really expect that the investments your club will make will also focus on kind of even outside of just female-led, but maybe non-traditional projects, right? Different jurisdictions, places that are going through, fundamental changes where, because of the folks that you have internal to the group, you'll be able to assess and evaluate risk differently, right? And I think that will create some really interesting investment decisions.
And I think the reality is that we cannot just invest in female-led projects because there aren't enough of them. And that's just the reality. And so if we did that, we'd really be limiting ourselves, which would not be a smart investment strategy to do. So you're very right. It is looking at what's different, what's happening differently. How do we make sure, especially in Canada, that we're also looking at things from a First Nations equity perspective, and how do we partner on that front? And how do we ensure that not only are we elevating our own voices as women, but we're also elevating other marginalized voices who have the opportunity to participate, but just need different ways of participating? And how can the club support that? Because I think, if we really want to get into it, and I've shared this with a few people over the last 6 to 8 months with Femina at large, my whole dream and wish and goal and hope for Femina is that we actually become owner operators of mines under the Femina umbrella. And we have the opportunity to do that because we will have this investment club, which hopefully turns into an investment fund or more than one fund that women are actively running, participating in, generating wealth from, and we're seeing companies perform better because of that. Does then Femina also then be able to have that influence at the board level? Do we become owners from an investment perspective, and then start placing, just from the sheer talent that is within our membership, start placing women in these leadership roles where they are now making the top decisions. They are sitting in the top seats. And do we as Femina actually have the ripple effect to then become not just a membership-based organization where women can come, but we're actually doing the on-the-ground work as well. And we're actually bringing minds into our own system and operating them from a feminist perspective. And let me be very clear, that does not mean the exclusion of men. Feminism is not the exclusion of men. Feminism is just ensuring that we all have the equal opportunities, and that inclusion is at the forefront of every mine design, operation, culture, whatever it may be. And so if we can bring that and then start supporting mines in that way, like, to me, what a way to live life. Like, that to me is the ultimate dream, is being able to actually show we can do this differently in the industry. And not only can we do it differently, it actually works better when we take things from that inclusivity and feminist perspective.
No, 100%. Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I mean, you got to have money to really sit at the table, right? Or at least have people actually listen to you when you're at the table. At least, and I think that makes complete sense. I'm super excited to see how that progresses. And I hear pieces of what you're talking about too that really resonate on the IRMA inclusion piece, which I'm a big fan of IRMA. I'm running a program right now in Guyana, and our group CTA that's doing the environmental baseline and the stakeholder engagement work. They're IRMA certified and IRMA auditors. And I just think, your inclusion in those types of requirements for investment also go a long way, right? I mean, it's a box that someone's got to check in order to a check, right? It makes a huge difference.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's, I wear my Femina hat, but I also work with IRMA. So I work for the Initiative for Responsible Mining Assurance. And I've been helping IRMA for the last year with their mine engagement. And it's been incredible to see the uptake and traction for IRMA and for the standard, because it really is the strongest standard on the market right now. And the reasons why we're seeing so much traction on that front is really because of the influence of investors and purchasers, OEMs. Those are the two houses within IRMA, because IRMA is equally governed between 6 houses. And I know Amy was on this podcast last year, so everyone should go back and listen to her episode.
What are they talking about? Go back.
Go back and listen. But that really is when we see that full value chain starting to ask for more responsible mining. We need to pay attention, and we need to pay attention that those will be the companies that do get the investment, that do get the checks. And not only is it best practice to get money so that you can actually develop your project, it is actually just best practice for the trust, for stakeholders, for longevity of your project, for risk management on climate, on social issues, on water management. You need that roadmap and you need that framework in order to have a successful operation. And IRMA's doing that. And IRMA has been doing that for a while now. And I think as IRMA continues to develop, it's coming out with its updated standard in 2025, which is a response from industry and response from all 6 of the houses kind of coming together and saying we can do even better than what we have been doing. We're just going to see those numbers grow. We're almost at 100 mine sites globally using IRMA. We see more auditors coming into our system, seeing it as a value add. So then when we were looking from the Femina perspective and looking at the investment side, it was just a no-brainer that we would require that mines look to IRMA and participate in IRMA to know that the investments that we are making are also being coupled with the highest mining standard there is on the market right now.
Yeah. And I think, when that approach is built in from the very earliest stages, right, from greenfield mapping and exploration all the way through, really what it does from an investment perspective is it identifies risk so much earlier, I think, than other approaches in a holistic way. So your project is de-risked much earlier with that more kind of like, 360-degree view of all the different stakeholders and areas. And I think that's why I really think folks will start using it more and more at an earlier and earlier stage for just that reason. That's when people actually appreciate that type of
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, we never would have known that this was going to be a potential problem if we hadn't looked at it this way. Yeah.
Well, and trying to retrofit once those risks come to light that weren't identified early, trying to retrofit those back into a responsible model, in some cases is almost impossible. They're just too far gone. And so it's a matter of just managing them at that point, and there is no ability to mitigate. And so you're exactly right. It's the earlier you start using those roadmaps, the earlier you can de-risk your project. I mean, it's so obvious, but that's just the way to do it from an investment standpoint.
When you put all of this together, you're kind of sitting at the intersection of, women's leadership, responsible practices, and investment. How do you anticipate something like this can really reshape what mining looks like over the next decade?
I think when you empower women and embolden women to really step into the industry as their full selves and show them all of the opportunities that they have, naturally you're just going to see an energy shift within who's making decisions and how those decisions are being made. Again, I think that when we look at it from kind of tying the dots together from what does responsible mining have to do with investment and what does investment have to do with women coming into the investment side, it really is, as you said, when women have money at the table, they are able to make decisions. Mm-hmm. We know that when those decisions get made, we're going to see companies shaping differently. We're going to see them designing their projects differently to be more inclusive of women. We also know that when women sit on boards and when women have the opportunities to sit at these levels, that they often bring other women's names forward for C-suite positions, for executive roles, for other board roles. And so just like we've seen it for the last century or more of men bringing in men that they know onto these tables, we're going to start seeing that happen with women as well. And so the hope and goal is that we see parity across the board. I think one of the things that always frustrates me being Canadian and when I speak about needing more women in our industry is everyone says, yeah, but Canada's doing so well. You have 17% female representation and Canada is leading in this area. And it frustrates me so very much because 17% should not be something that we celebrate. That should not be what we hang our hats on to give ourselves a good pat on the back and say that we figured this out for the mining industry. And I think that we're not seeing that number move fast enough because, again, we're only looking at it from like a recruitment standpoint of bringing women into the industry. And we're not looking at it for how are we retaining women once they get to those executive levels because women are burning out and leaving at those levels because this whole concept of we can have it all is a little bullshit. And I'm sorry if I can't say that on the podcast.
At this point, so you can say whatever you want.
It's total bullshit because we can't have it all. And women hold so many other responsibilities, whether it be from parenting, whether it be from community, their community that they hold, whether it be family obligations. We did not lessen those loads for women when we also said you are also able to have these higher level roles. We just said, if you want it, you now need to do both. And that is unsustainable for women to be able to do. And so we need to be looking at ways. And that's why with Femina, why we created this safe space, why we created the community, because we needed to be able to get support from each other, to be able to lean on and be able to say, okay, we can keep going. We can keep doing this. While also really celebrating the successes that women bring. And so I think getting back to your question is how will we see this reshape the industry? It's like with the more voices that are brought forward, we're going to see these horrible behaviors that we continue to see reports and cases come out with lessen. We're going to see women not be punished for coming forward for behaviors that they're seeing, but rather being rewarded for it. We're going to see just the industry, again, more profits being made by women making better financial decisions. We're going to see higher safety stats because we already know there's already all the research out there that women are safer operators when it comes to actual operating mine sites. So we're just going to see the industry pivot. And inevitably, we know from a talent perspective that the generation that is currently kind of holds the power in mining right now, they will be retiring. There's 10 years maybe, if we look at that, 10 years where a lot of these people will be retiring. Yes, will they probably then go and sit on boards? Yeah. Do we need to then also address that? Yes, we do. It's a whole system that we need to be looking at. But just that inevitable kind of flow of transition for where talent's going to be coming from, women have such an opportunity to really be stepping up into these leadership roles and really kind of reshaping what then operations look like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it really, hopefully there is kind of a fundamental shift heading our way, with that regard, because I won't remember the exact statistic, but we did some work last year and there were more men over the age of 80 on mining company boards than there were women under the age of like 65.
Oh my gosh.
So, I mean, that's just, and that's not to dismiss the bad of someone who's worked in the industry for so long, right? But like, they're, and it also, it's not just women on boards, right? That address these things, but I think it's a great kind of indicator of where we stand. And the progress we have not actually made in certain areas. And so I really genuinely believe that you're right, that until women are demonstrating we're going to put our money where our mouth is and we're a valuable voice at the table and a valuable investor group, and that will only really happen once it happens, right? Once companies see that money at the table and start reacting to the questions and the priorities that money brings with it. So super excited to how it goes and support it however I can and we can at Prospector for sure.
Thank you. And I think that's exactly it. It's collaboration too, right? It's not, we are not going to do this on our own in a silo or in a vacuum. And that's been the real joy of sharing this idea really openly across the board with as many people as I can, is that so many other women come out of the woodwork of saying, oh my gosh, I've been thinking about this, or I could help with this aspect, or I know this person, you should chat with them. And so I think that we do this and we create this momentum by being collaborative and being open and being supportive of each other and the work that we're all trying to do, and not trying to think we're the only ones in this space and we need to own it and this needs to be our little thing that we do. No, if we can help drive and be a catalyst for this getting much, much bigger than what we could do at Femina, I'm here for that, because without that collaboration, we're just getting in our own way and we're stalling those numbers even more than what would happen if we just kind of open the doors and say, okay, how do we work together?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the real negative kind of unintended consequences of a lot of the programs that are out there or efforts that have been made before is it created this like scarcity mindset, right? Even just like award type things or different types of programs where it creates like, if you're not in this little group, right, then you're not the women that the industry wants on boards, right? Or there's only this many the industry can tolerate. So you got
only 17% apparently.
Right.
That's what we're tapping at.
So we're getting pretty close. The rest of you just calm down, go back to what you were doing. So I think that kind of scarcity mindset does create challenges and other, it's really important to be like, no, like there is more than enough room out there for all of us to support each other and get behind anything that's trying something different, right? Even if something doesn't work, let's just give it a shot, because we're not going to build the mines of the future with the same money and the same methods that we've been doing for the last several decades. Like the pipeline's just not there. The money's not there. The workforce isn't there. So there's plenty of problems out there that we can all collaborate on solving,
Yeah. And the scarcity model is just in such opposition to where we know the industry has to be. We know the industry has to grow rapidly right now. We know there needs to be more mines happening much faster than we've ever seen, with more opportunities for leadership, more opportunities for jobs, whatever it may be. And so that whole scarcity mindset has really boxed us in and been very unfavorable, because the fact of the matter is we now need to think of it from the abundance perspective that it actually is, and the full scale of what mining needs to be doing globally.
Well, and I really think that a big reason why the financing structures that support the industry are broken and aren't delivering, despite all the chatter and despite all the demand, is because the people who have made a lot of money in mining have made money off of projects that never really intended to go into production, right? They're making money off of, the way that the stock reacts to drilling news and all that stuff. And that's fine for one part, but like, we've got to see investors rewarded for putting money into projects that actually turn into mines, that mine the actual mineral and turn into metals we need to do all this stuff, right? And I remember just in a lot of the conferences I've been in, pitch after pitch after pitch. Well, are you actually going to build this mine? Well, no, we're just explorers. It'll take several. And again, that's fine and a normal part of the industry for a piece. But we've got to start to change where the money goes. Like some of it's got to go to actually building mines. They're going to right?
Yep.
Is
Yep.
the bigger problems. And I think that's where also investors who have come into the industry thinking that's what they were investing in, if they're new, if they're non-traditional investors, and then they're like, wait, no, like I'm getting screwed because it's really all about anti-dilution maneuvers and like all these complicated things that have nothing to do with whether I put money into a mine that's actually going to mine stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And we need that exploration. Like there's no doubt about that. We need it. We need people finding where we're going to mine. But you're totally right.
We don't need it to be like 6 times over.
Yes.
Yes. Right. Just
Exactly.
asking old work.
Exactly. Well, and also we can explore in new ways by leveraging technologies that's out there as well. But you're totally right. It is that it gets risky. It gets risky once you put a shovel in the ground and you start trying to actually build an operation. And that's where we constantly see runover. That's where we constantly see more money needing to be pumped in. That's where we see the risk start really rearing their heads or the unknowns start coming up. And so it, again, gets into that really risky area of investing. But we need to be able to talk about that. And we need to be able to be very clear about what those risks are, how those risks are managed, and then the opportunity, because you're totally right. If we don't actually start building mines, what are we doing? There's no energy transition. There's no green transition. There's none of that. We are just stuck in this cycle that we put ourselves in without any sort of new production coming online.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with that, we ask all of our guests the same question. So interested to hear your answer. If you could just wave a magic wand, you didn't have to do any meetings, you didn't have to do any work, and just overnight you could change one thing about the industry magically, what would you change?
Oh, it's such an easy answer. I would see that at least 50% of mining investment was coming from women, and that women were making those decisions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, because I think that's going to be so powerful the day that happens.
Yep.
We know we've done it. We know we've done it right. And we will see those shifts happen in the industry.
Awesome. Well, can't wait to have you come back maybe after the launch in early 2025. And
please.
Attention and keep an eye out for that and see how it goes. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for this. I really enjoyed it.